The case that the Colts are going to try to build under Daniel Jones, in my opinion, is twofold. One, you have to try to convince new ownership that you are the guy to get the job done if you're Shane Steichen, right? So instead of saying, I'm going to live and die by Anthony Richardson, what he is doing is he's banking on the fact that he can bring the Colts to a level of being competitive in the same vein that they were with Garner Minshew. And he can bring that to ownership at the end of the year and say, look at my resume up to this point. I've worked with Phillip Rivers. I've worked with Justin Herbert while he was a young quarterback. I've worked with Jalen Hurts while he was a young quarterback. I've made it work with Garner Minshew here. I've made it work with Daniel Jones. The only guy that I have not been able to get it done with is Anthony Richardson. And the question I have for you, Carly Ursay Gordon, this is Shane Steichen speaking, of course, is this. Whose body of work are you going to trust when doing this? You're going to look and say that it was a me problem and not an Anthony Richardson problem. And I know this sounds like snake type of stuff, but this is just the reality. It's not that he's a snake. It's that good Lord. I mean, if you're Shane Steichen and you can't make it work with this guy, it is what it is. He's going to try to make the case at the end of the year. Of course, he's banking on the fact that this Colts team can at least compete for a playoff berth with Daniel Jones. He's then going to take that success or that something that resembles a level of success. And he's going to look at ownership and say, this is what I did with Daniel Jones. Now just imagine what I can do if I had a crack at one of the top guys in next year's draft. And that's going to be Shane Steichen's case at the end of the year. And not for anything, in all fairness, it's a damn good one for Shane Steichen. Now on the other side of that, of course, Carly Ursay Gordon would also have the right to ask and be perfectly within bounds to say, sure, Shane, that's totally fine. But you and Chris did draft Anthony Richardson, and not for anything. Why should I trust that you two are the guys that I should trust to draft our next quarterback, particularly in a year that it seems by all, listen, I'm not the expert on drafts and scouting. Okay, those are other people. This quarterback class in 2026, of course, Arch Manning is the one that gets dangled by everyone's fantasizing. But there's a whole lot of quarterbacks in that draft, right? And why should I trust you guys to get that done? After all, you do look at Chris Ballard's reign up to this point and you say, listen, he's had opportunities to get a quarterback. Now, I don't think they've been as plentiful as you think. Like, I don't think there's that many surefire moments where Ballard could have gotten a guy, right? But you do kind of add them all up and say, well, it's kind of hard to make the case in favor of Chris Ballard drafting the next guy, right? For example, 2020. I think ultimately, when I look back at 2020, to remind you, okay, I'll recap it all. 2020, Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall pick, Cincinnati Bengals, okay? The Miami Dolphins have what I believe is the number 5 overall pick. And then the Chargers have the 6 or the 7, okay? The Colts have the 13th overall pick. Now, this is a year where Joe Burrow gets drafted number 1. The Dolphins in the quarterback business, they draft Tua Tagovailoa. The Chargers have gotten rid of a guy by the name of Phillip Rivers, and now they were in the quarterback business. They draft Justin Herbert. The Colts trade their 13th overall pick for DeForest Buckner, who in fairness, a hell of a player, and then they signed Phillip Rivers. Now, you look at that offseason, and Jalen Hurts was in that draft as well in the second round, maybe the most egregious miss of them all, right? But, I mean, a whole lot of teams passed on Jalen Hurts, right? Like, that wasn't just the Colts. Neither here nor there. I don't think it's the strongest case, but you could look at 2020 and say they dropped the ball there. I personally think you walk out of that with Phillip Rivers, DeForest Buckner in a playoff berth. I mean, I thought they handled 2020 just fine at quarterback, but okay, I'll give you that. Particularly when you start adding up all the other ones, right? 2022, the Colts coming off of a year with Carson Wentz, where the worst kept secret in all of football was that the Colts were no longer in the Carson Wentz business as that season was rolling down. Obviously, they collapsed massive at the end of the year, okay? And Jim Irsay obviously was not too pleased with Carson Wentz, or so that's what was reported to us, right? Going into that offseason, you had an option to get 2 guys, trade for 2 guys. Baker Mayfield and Matt Ryan. Baker Mayfield, who was vocal about the fact that the Colts were the place that he wanted to go. He may not have said it directly, but large amounts of reports. Like, and where there's smoke, there's fire with that type of thing. Baker wanted to be a Colt, okay? At that time, he was looking at the board and saying that was the best opportunity for him to succeed. Obviously, things have worked out just fine for Baker Mayfield. They had a choice between him, an ascending young quarterback, or Matt Ryan, whose arm was like an overcooked piece of spaghetti. It was a noodle, okay? I mean, Matt Ryan could not throw the ball any further than I could in 2022, in all fairness, and I'm able to get it about 35, 40 yards. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter, okay? They chose Matt Ryan as opposed to Baker Mayfield. Obviously, that decision looks terrible in hindsight, and 2022 was a disaster. 2023, fast forward now to kind of where we're at now, you go into a draft with the number 4 overall pick. The Chicago Bears have the number 1 overall pick and are willing to trade it to anyone who is willing to buy it. The Houston Texans, who also need a quarterback, are at the number 2 overall pick. You have two guys in Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Now, in my opinion, and I'm not an NFL scout, but if I could see it, I would. I mean, Stevie Wonder could have seen, in my opinion, that CJ Stroud was the best quarterback in that draft. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you viewed that as a two-man race, and many people did, where it was Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Well, okay. If you're the Colts, you are looking at that and saying, to stick at number 4, if we view those two guys as the best guys and we know the Texans are going to get one of them, you can probably say that trading up to the number 1 overall pick, albeit might have been a hefty tag, obviously in hindsight, that was the move. And I know we can do this thing, and I've been guilty of it, where you can talk about in the moment how something was a reasonable thing. Like when they did not trade up, I said, okay, fine if you're the Indianapolis Colts. If you don't trade up, I can see why you wouldn't. But there's only so many times where you can justify a decision due to what makes sense at the time and then view the results in hindsight and say, obviously you made the wrong decision there. Only so many times can you view a situation like that and then come out of it on the other end and then give them the pass for that type of thing. And particularly when you end up drafting Anthony Richardson. For me, you look and say, how can you possibly trust these guys to draft the next quarterback? I don't know. Like maybe they've learned, but is that a game that you're willing to play? Are you willing to roll the dice on that? Because that will then decide the trajectory of your organization for another 5, 6, 7, 10 years, right? And that's where the Indianapolis Colts are at.